what's up? This is Joel here at the Chicago Music Exchange, and I'm here with Matt from Alexander Pedals. Today we're doing the demo for the awesome exclusive history lesson delay pedal. So Matt, in a nutshell, what makes the history lesson so unique?
The history lesson is kind of a greatest hits of all the cool delay effects from the past. It's got tape, echo, and analog delay, and modern sounding digital delay all in one box.
All right, so let's do a quick overview of just the basic control layout.
Okay, so we'll start here with the time knob. This sets the delay time from basically 0 milliseconds to around 900 milliseconds. We've got a feedback knob which controls the number of repeats. The mix control lets you go from a full dry to an equal mix to a full wet, and that's a little bit different than a lot of delays that'll offer you only control over the wet signal. The mod control at noon, there's basically no modulation. It's just the delay signal. As you advance the knob past noon, clockwise, you get a slow chorus effect, and the further you go from noon, the greater the depth of that effect. If you roll it back below noon, you actually get a faster vibrato effect, and the distance away from noon is the depth of that as well. We've got a mode switch here in the middle, and then down at the bottom we've got a tap and division switch. You tap it to set the delay time. We've got a bypass foot switch over here, and when you bypass this, you have the option to either have a buffered bypass with a hard cutoff of the delay signal, or you can have a trails bypass. And when you engage the trails bypass, the delay signal will carry on. So whatever was going on in the delay, when you hit the bypass, will continue to trail out and fade away.
Its cycle.
Right, exactly.
We're playing through an old Vibrolux reverb. We've got an old 60s 335 that's been re-necked with a 70s 335 neck. And we're also going to be using a Fano JM6 with P90, so you can hear how the history lesson sounds with single coils as well.
So we're starting in the 1963 mode. So this again is the tape echo inspired mode. The modulation knob controls various amounts of either wow or flutter, which are anomalies based on the mechanism of the tape echo itself. So warped belts, flywheels, flutters caused by uneven spots in the tape transport, things like that. So the modulation is sort of very organic sounding.
So that's the 1977 mode, and explain exactly what's going on here.
Okay, so this is based on a vintage analog delay pedal that I own. Oftentimes they're calibrated to allow enough signal in the repeats to oscillate or to feed back on themselves. So what we've got here is when you get the feedback knob much past noon, even 1 o'clock or so, the analog delay signal actually starts to feed back in on itself and repeat even when you're not giving it new notes. So every time the repeats kick around, you have less and less high signals. So you end up with this really dark, kind of washy thing going on. And if you crank the feedback, it'll just sit there and oscillate forever. And it'll end up as this sort of block, this chunk of weird analog delay mush that sounds really cool. It's one of the coolest things about a vintage analog delay. So yeah, this is based on a rack mount digital delay that I've had for what seems like a million years. One of the cool things about the digital delay is that they don't have the clock noise of an analog delay, and they don't have the physical limitations of a tape delay. I measured the frequency response of my rack mount unit, and I looked at how the repeats degrade and what the curve of the feedback decay is. So it's really bright and present and sounds really cool. And you can control the mix finely enough that you can make the repeats not get in your way, which is always an issue with the digital delay. The feedback, you'll get a really long delay, but it doesn't oscillate because digital delays don't do that. And then the mod knob controls a little bit of pitch modulation. So we're actually controlling the delay itself rather than, it's not a separate effect. So we've got basically two delays working together, and one of them is modulated. So if you want to, we can listen to how the modulation sounds different on this mode. just like on the other two modes, we can actually run the delay time all the way down, and we can use this as kind of a digital sounding chorus or vibrato. And I actually added in a tiny bit of delay, about 10 milliseconds of delay, and a bunch of feedback to emulate a digital flanger. So it's not as dramatic and spaceship sounding as an analog flanger would be, but it's very reminiscent of sort of the Ibanez and Roland rack mount digital flange units would have been back in the mid to late 80s. This is Matthew with Alexander Pedals. I'm with Joel at Chicago Music Exchange.
Thanks for tuning in for our little history lesson with the history lesson.